is going to be speaking from the Competent Communicator Manual. That's the very first manual that Toastmasters start. She's going to be doing speech number 4, and the title of that program is How to Say It. So the objectives of that particular speech is to select the right words and sentence structure to communicate your ideas clearly, accurately, and vividly. Use rhetorical devices to enhance and emphasize ideas and eliminate jargon and unnecessary words, and use correct grammar. So it's a focus on word usage. Our speaker is, when I asked whether or not Toastmasters, it was that the theme, and she's done this great FTFADIA, I love that, and I'll let you guys put all that together. I think it's on your agenda. Whether or not Toastmasters had achieved that for her, and she mentioned that last year when she was, it was probably not this Christmas, but the Christmas before, she was asked by her work, given a lots of advance notice, whether or not she'd be willing to do a speech or a toast to her boss. And she had lots of time to do it, but she declined for fear of, we all know, public speaking, and particularly in front of your colleagues, which that can be quite unnerving. And she's pleased to say that this year, that even before there was a canvas of who would volunteer, she volunteered and said, I would be willing to do that. And I'm pleased to report, and she reported that she did a fabulous job, and she attributes a lot of the confidence that she had through her experience here at Toastmasters. So kudos to her for that. So sharing with us, not just for children, please welcome Jennifer Nelson.
Thank you, Lori. Ladies and gentlemen, do you believe in fairies? Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our welcome guests. For millennia, cultures all around the world maintained a belief in the realm that the Western world refers to as fairyland. And common people, royal people, clergy, uneducated, educated people, many people believed in the fairy realm with as much conviction as they believed in the heavenly realm. It was only in the practical industrial age of the Victorian era when fairies became pushed to the domain of the nursery and fairy legends became fairy tales. However, when I was traveling in Britain, I saw evidence that there is still a living belief in the fairy realm. I had some friends direct me to a fairy hill, and this hill, it was quite easy to find. They said, simply drive through the town of Aberfoyle. When you reach the end of the town, turn left. It was a very small town. Drive as far as you can until you can make another left, and then you will see this sign, and they cryptically added, you will know when you see it. So we followed the directions, saw the sign. I was disappointed to see it was simply a plywood sign with the words Fairy Hill painted on it and an arrow pointing into a direction. But we pulled the car over and we got out and started walking up the fairy hill. And here it became a little otherworldly, I have to admit. It was an interesting experience. First thing that we observed was the ground was covered in shamrocks, long-stemmed three-leaf clovers, which, as you probably know, is often associated with leprechauns, which are a type of Irish fairy. But more interesting than that was the trees, tree trunks, and the branches were all very dark, almost black, and they coiled like a unicorn horn. And as we walked up the hill, it felt as though the hill was hollow. Now the legend is that the hill is in fact hollow, and there's a fairy kingdom inside this hill. And our footsteps reverberated very much like if you've ever walked on the peat bogs out in Richmond or in Delta. So it was a very interesting experience, but it got even more interesting. We reached the top of the hill, and there was a clearing. At one point while we were up there, I walked around the perimeter and I found that there were 7 paths leading up to this spot. When we arrived, the sun was just setting, and the golden rays of the sun got caught up in the 2 silver birch trees which were in the center. Now, the foliage of these trees recast the light and provided a silver sheen to everything. So the outline of all of the leaves had a bit of silver to them. My companion's face had sort of a silver glow. Even my own skin. Everything was glowing a little bit silver. But even more distinguished than that was the fact that every twig of every branch of every tree and shrub was covered in ribbons. And there was long ribbons and short ribbons, and wide and narrow. Some were very crisp. Some seemed to have rotted off the trees and were lying in tatters at the base of the trees. Some were patterned, some were solid. It was just a fascinating collection of thousands of ribbons. The trees were, some of them were bowed over under the weight of all these ribbons. And you could actually walk up and put your arms around a bundle and your fingers wouldn't meet, there were so many. So I examined one of the ribbons. And on it was a child's handwriting. And it said, "Dear Fairy Rose, please help me with my math test." And I realized that we were surrounded by thousands of people's wishes. Every ribbon represented a wish. So I took the next ribbon, and this one had an adult's handwriting, which surprised me. And the handwriting on this ribbon said, "Dear Fairy, please help me with my presentation." It could mean a promotion, or words to that effect. So I quickly grabbed the third ribbon, and this one was again an adult's handwriting. And this one said, "Dear Fairy, please cure my daughter of her cancer." And I was just struck suddenly that I was prying into the personal wishes and personal prayers of individuals. And I was also suddenly struck out of my sort of elated and happy state into a moment of reverence for this place, which was obviously a very sacred place to so many people who had been there before me. So, if at any time in your life you could say that you had, yes, you had believed in fairies, I can tell you that I've borne witness to the fact that thousands of people still do.